When you buy a car, should you lease it? Should you pay cash? Should you get a loan? Should you do a longer loan? Should you put money down? Is leasing, renting? I've been around the car industry for about 15 years and I was a financial advisor. And I'm gonna be breaking down my complete thoughts on how you should buy a car today. And it's kind of a mix between Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Dave Ramsey. I kind of in the middle ground between there. Interest rates are still kind of high right now, and you're noticing that when you're buying a car, but you have like four schools of thoughts. The four schools of thoughts are that you should lease, there's a cash, there's doing a shorter loan, and then there's what the average American does, which is a 72-month loan. I'm gonna break it all down for you and explain what I think you should do, what I personally like to do. There's two options that I like when buying a car. It depends on if it's used or new. We're gonna be breaking down a $55,000 vehicle today. Now, the reason I'm doing $55,000 is the average car in America is around 51, 52, so I'm leaving about 3K in there for tax. It could be more than that, okay? I mean, obviously, if you're going out and buying a Tahoe, you're in the 80, 90 grand range, and I get it. There are some dealers that charge dock fees and different things like that, but for all intents and purposes, if the vehicle you're buying is close to the range that I'm talking about right here, this is basically what you're gonna be looking at today. So we'll go over what the average American looks at, and we'll go over kind of what some of the smarter ways to do it are. So first off right here, 72 months. When you walk into a dealership, when you walk into your average car dealership, they're gonna give you what's called a pencil, okay? Most customers would probably call it a quote, but they're gonna give you what's called a pencil. And on that, most of them are gonna come out and they're probably gonna show you a 60 and 72. Depending on the price of the vehicle you're looking at, they're probably gonna show you a 60 or 72 month loan on there. And if you're going with the 72, which is what the majority of car loans are, it's probably gonna be somewhere between an 8 to 10% rate. I'm going with an 8.5% rate here. Now, can you go to your local credit union and beat them up and get a better rate? Sure, but the average American's walking out with about an 8.5% rate on their car loan, all right? That's meaning you have about a $977 payment. Obviously, that doesn't include insurance, but you're having about close to, call it $1,000 payment. Over the life of that loan, you're paying $15,402 in interest. Okay, $15,402 in interest, which means the $55,000 car that you bought actually cost you a little over 70 grand. Now, you can argue and say the majority of Americans don't actually keep their car for that length of time, but we can't really put that into our calculations here. So I can't put that some people keep their car for 2 years and some people keep them for the life of the loan, but this is what it was actually costing you. Now, something to keep in mind here as we start to go down this line, if you're going with a 72-month loan, a lot of that payment that you're making every month goes towards interest. So when you hear about someone being upside down or having negative equity, that is the big downside to going with a longer loan, is you trade it in 2 years, now you're upside down. You owe more than what the car is currently valued at because you're buying a depreciating asset. Now, I'm gonna jump over to a 48-month loan. This is not a very popular loan to do. This is something that I personally like. And the reason that I like it is if you compare it to cash, okay? Cash is about, well, obviously it's pretty simple. We all understand what cash means. If it's 55K, you paid $55,000 of cash for it, right? But when you go with a shorter loan, shorter loans usually mean better rates. I mean, back in like 2016 to 18, this will probably be a 2% rate. But if you compare this 8.5% to 4.5%, I know that if I save this $55,000 and I go put it in just a basic index fund, I can probably get 8 to 10% a year off of that money. So for me, if I'm gonna go with a 48-month loan, in my mind, I'm preserving the cash and I'm gonna go get a yield on that money somewhere. Even if you just go buy T-bills, you can still get that, that same rate, if not a little bit better. But 48-month loan, $1,254 a month. Obviously, your payment is higher, okay? Your payment is higher. You're paying it off significantly quicker. But with that higher payment, look at how much the difference of interest is. $5,200 versus $15,402. You're paying a little over 10 grand less in interest, bringing the total cost of that vehicle of $60,201. Now, I'm fine with doing that on the 48-month loan, which is one of the options that I would prefer to go with here, because I don't want to unload $55,000 cash on a depreciating asset. To me, if I'm getting rid that size of cash, I want to put it into an appreciating asset, something that can actually make me money. Now, I'm going to talk about leases. Okay, and this is kind of a divisive subject. The second you hear someone talk about leases, they say, oh, you're just renting a vehicle. And I kind of want to deconstruct that for you today because I don't think that that's the proper way to look at leases. And it actually allows kind of some of the shift in risk to happen. Now, guys, with almost 200,000 followers across TikTok, YouTube, and all the different platforms, we do not do sponsored ads. Okay, I don't take sponsorship money and put other people's businesses on our platforms. I sponsor it myself with ProdigyProspect.com. Okay, this is our business. About 12, 13 years ago, I was the head sales trainer for one of the largest car dealerships in the United States. Since then, I have built a consulting company and I've helped dealerships and businesses that have sales nationwide. It doesn't just have to be car dealerships. Car dealerships are our bread and butter, but we work with all different kinds of sales teams with phone process, email process, text process, the process of handling leads. So check out ProdigyProspect.com and let's schedule time to chat today. All right, so leases. Just give me a shot at this, okay? Give me a shot at this before you say leasing is renting. And obviously, if you're in the camp that says that you should only pay cash for a car, you're probably not gonna like leases, okay? If you're in this camp, if you're in the cash camp, you're probably not gonna like leases. If you're in the 72-month camp and you like the $977 payment more than the $1,250 payment, okay? I get it. Stuff's expensive. We got normal daily life we got to pay for. Groceries are not cheap. I get it, okay? You're probably going to be someone that likes leases. So either of these two people, maybe the 48-month person's not going to like leases in months because you're actually going to have your car paid off during that time. But there's a couple reasons that I like leases. When you go and take a 48-month loan or a 72-month loan, you're the one that's taking the risk on what the value of that car is going to be. Okay, on these two right here, you're the one that's taking the risk on what the value of that car is going to be at the end of the loans or at the point when you're going to trade it in or get rid of it. Because like we said earlier, I know not a lot of people are going to keep this all the way for the 72-month mark, and a lot of cars in America don't even last that long anyways. So with a lease, okay, the bank is taking the risk. So when you go to lease a vehicle, typically you would have a money factor here. I just went ahead and put a 2% rate right here so it's more understandable for everyone. Typically this would be a money factor at a dealership. It can convert over to an interest rate. And the bank is going to say what the value of the vehicle should be 36 months from now, right? So if you have a $55,000 vehicle, essentially the bank is saying, you know, hey, this vehicle is going to be worth $32K at the end of this. So they're saying you're buying it for $55K now, it's going to be worth $32K at the end. You need to pay the difference between $55K and $32K, right? So they're saying you need to pay the difference, which is $23,000. And I don't know if that's what the actual difference is on this one, but you're paying the depreciation essentially with a little bit of markup on with interest, right? Now, what I like about that though is leasing, other than paying cash, okay? Leasing is the only way to make sure 100% you are not in a negative equity situation at the end of the 36 months right there, okay? At this, you could be in negative equity, and at this, you could be in negative equity unless you just plan on this is the one vehicle I'm buying, this is it, I'm done, I'm over, which is not the majority of Americans. So if you do a 36-month lease, you get the 2% rate. You'll notice I put $2,000 down right here. Okay, I put $2,000 down right here. I did not put that on either of those because leasing is one of the only ones that I do like to put money down. The majority of Americans, when they walk in today, unless they're more of in a cash position and just trying to put half down, the majority of Americans do not want to put money down when they buy a car. The reason I like to put money down on leases is on a 72-month loan, okay, on a 72-month loan, for every $1,000 you put down, okay, every $1,000 you put down, it only changes the monthly payment by about 12 bucks. Okay, whereas on a lease, every $1,000 you put down changes the payment by 30 or 40 bucks. That's a pretty big difference. So I did $2,000 down, showing it as a $600 payment. I don't actually have a vehicle built right here, but I've done a lot of leases in my life. This is about what it would break down about right nowadays with all the specials they got going on. Over the course of the loan, I'm gonna pay $4,000 in interest, roughly, and I'm gonna pay $21,600. If you take that $600 times 36 months, it equals $21,600. So essentially, the manufacturer would be saying that probably $17,000 of that was depreciation on the vehicle, and the other $4,000 you're paying is interest. But if we compare these scenarios, taking out cash, because obviously there's no interest in that situation, on a 72-month, you had over 15 grand in interest. On a 48 month, you had a little over 5 grand in interest. And on this one, you had about roughly 4K in interest. And obviously credit is going to be dependent on some of these things. But at the end of a lease, you've got a couple options, okay? Now, one reason I like it is because I like getting a new car every 3 years. That's just something I personally like. I like having the lower payment. That doesn't offend me. But at the end of the 36 months, you can either give the keys back to the dealership and just say, I'm done with this, and move on with your life. You don't owe anything. That's fine. It is what it is. But you can also go look at what the value is of what they said the value of the vehicle is going to be. Okay, because they already put that. They already said they could predict the future when you sign the loan. And if your vehicle is valued more than what you can buy it for, then go buy it. You're the one that can buy it for that number. So if you went and bought this $55,000 vehicle and they said, you know, we believe it's going to depreciate down to this amount right here, okay? Well, you get that number at the end. It doesn't change. That number is not, it's not fluctuating. It doesn't change. So if you run the books on it and your 36-month lease is up and it's actually worth like 36, well, then you can buy it for 32. Fantastic, right? But if it books out for 28,000 and the number you can buy it for is 32, then just hand the keys back and walk away. Now, there's not every vehicle leases well. For example, a Chevy Suburban is not going to lease well. A 3/4 ton diesel truck's not going to lease well. Half-ton trucks, smaller SUVs, cars, all of them lease fantastically. So these are basically the 4 options you're going to get. Under each of these is kind of some, you know, subcategory options you could do. For example, on a 72-month loan, there are some people that are buying the more expensive vehicles that are going with 84 months and some 96 months. I personally would not recommend that. I would always say if you cannot afford the vehicle at 72 months, I would just say you cannot afford the vehicle. This is probably one of my favorite right here, going with a 48-month loan. I'd rather preserve my cash, and if it's a vehicle I'm buying and I know for a fact I'm going to keep it, I would probably go with the 48-month loan. Cash, obviously that is an option for people. The more expensive the vehicles get, the more cash you're going to have to be, you know, given out. And I personally would not want to part way with that much cash. And then a 36-month loan, or 36-month lease. It's hard to beat this in a lot of scenarios. Again, if I'm buying a vehicle that I know that it's just going to be our family car, it's going to stay with us for a decade, then I'm probably going to go with the 48-month. However, if there's a big enough incentive on the lease, I might still just lease it. Okay, I might still just lease it, and we might just, after the 36 months is up, we might just buy it. But at least it gives us the option to get out of it without having any negative equity during that time. Because if I go with the 72-month loan, and within 36 months, our family has grown or something has changed or we need 4-wheel drive or whatever it is, and you go to trade it in, chances are if you've been making the minimum payment on that, you're probably going to be not in the best situation as far as negative equity goes. So I don't like to ever be putting myself in the position with negative equity. And right now with what car dealerships are going through, there's kind of a slowdown happening. There has been for a lot of 2025, and that's brought the manufacturers to put quite a bit of incentives out there. So I know for a fact that there's some pretty good leasing incentives out there, and I know that you can at least get these rates if you go with those sizes on the loans. So anyways, let me know down in the comments what questions you guys have. I'm happy to break down anything to do with loans and the car industry and stuff like that for you guys. You guys know I'm all about money on this channel, and breaking it down to make sense for everyone. So thank you for watching the new YouTube channel. We're going to be posting long-form content and seeing if we can move some of the subscribers over from TikTok over to YouTube and grow in this era.